Once upon a time, there was a young boy named Pedro. Pedro lived with his father Carlos, his mother Juanita, his sister Maria, and his grandmother Isabel. Their modest home was a rural area near the sea. It was surrounded by cornfields on 3 sides. On the 4th side was a small orchard containing several avocado trees. Juanita and Isabel spent many hours each day cooking and cleaning. Sometimes Maria helped. Even at her young age, she could work the cornmeal into well-shaped tortillas. Maria loved the aroma of the tortillas as they sizzled on the skillets. Pedro's father was a fisherman. Most mornings, Carlos woke up very early to go fishing. Yawn. After a quick breakfast, he would gather up his rod and fishing net and march off towards the ocean. The journey was fairly short, but could be rather treacherous. The steep cliffs had to be descended slowly and carefully. One false step, and you could slip and fall into the jagged rocks below. Carlos was always relieved to reach the bottom safely. Standing at the water's edge, he would beat the fish hook, toss a line, and catch the net. Oh, okay. Pedro also enjoyed fishing, but was rarely permitted to accompany his father. Carlos was afraid that his son might slip and fall while descending the steep cliffs. Instead, Pedro usually stayed home. This was not so bad. He spent most of the time playing. Sometimes he pretended to be a brave matador facing a fierce bull with a bull ring. On other occasions, he was captain of a pirate ship, sailing off in search of treasure. But whenever he played, Pedro made sure to stay near the house. After all, there were coyotes nearby. Pedro also had chores to do. His favorite task was picking avocados. Pedro liked climbing the avocado tree and enjoyed searching for the ripest fruit. After picking the avocados, he would take them to his grandmother so she could make guacamole. Everybody loved Isabel's guacamole. It was heavenly. She made it from her great-grandmother's secret recipe. On Saturdays, Isabel would go to the village to sell her delicious guacamole. Sometimes and Maria got to go too. Pedro always looked forward to this, even though the village was a few kilometers away from the journey, and the journey took a long time. The village was a lively, colorful place, especially at fiesta time. Pedro had so much fun going to the village. He wished that he could go there much more often. Unfortunately, Pedro was too young to walk there by himself. Carlos had warned Pedro about the dangers. A young boy could become very lost on such a journey. He might meet some unsavory characters, or even be shot at by bandits. He could encounter nasty creatures, such as scorpions with their stinging tails, and rattlesnakes with their venomous fangs, and the ever-present coyotes with their very sharp teeth. One day, Pedro became bored. He had already picked some avocados, so Grandma Isabel was busy making her heavenly guacamole. His father, Carlos, was away fishing and would not come home for hours. Juanita and Maria were in the kitchen and had just started grinding the corn into meal. It would take quite a while to make all those tortillas. And even longer to finish cooking them. Pedro decided to go to the village. He thought he could get there more quickly if he borrowed a neighbor's donkey. After all, reasoned Pedro, it is much quicker to ride than to walk. To reach the neighbor's house, Pedro had to cross a field. In this field lived a ferocious bull. Pedro was more than halfway across the field before the bull noticed him. Suddenly the bull charged at Pedro, so Pedro ran as fast as he could. He could hear the bull getting closer. Pedro scrambled over the fence an instant before the bull's horns crashed into the wooden gate. That was a close call. Pedro's heart was beating very fast. After he caught his breath and calmed down, Pedro approached the neighbor's house. He knocked on the door. But no one was home, so he left his handkerchief at the stable. Pedro hoped his neighbors would notice the hanky and realize that he had borrowed the donkey. For a while, the journey towards the village went very well. Pedro and the donkey were making good time. Then, Pedro heard the coyote. The howling became louder and more frequent. The coyote must have been very hungry because it boldly came right up to him. Pedro was frightened, but he thought he would be safe because he was high enough off the ground. Nevertheless, it was a dangerous situation. there was a rattlesnake just ahead of the path. Pedro and the donkey were busy watching the coyote and only spotted the snake at the last instant. The donkey leapt into the air to avoid being struck by the snake's fangs. Poor Pedro was thrown from the donkey. He flew up into the air, then crashed to the ground with a bang. As Pedro lay there helpless, the hungry coyote seized the opportunity and crept towards the terrified boy. With its mouth open, the animal drew near. All those very sharp teeth were clearly visible. The coyote lunged at Pedro and then gave an excruciating yelp. Pedro could not believe his good fortune. At his feet lay the coyote, writhing in pain. For you see, the coyote had been watching Pedro and had failed to notice the rattlesnake. This proved to be a fatal mistake. Eventually, the snake slithered away. Pedro closed his eyes and said a little prayer. He gingerly rose to his feet and wandered off to find the donkey. A somewhat shaken but wiser boy made his way back to the neighbor's house. By this time, the neighbors had returned to their home. They listened to Pedro's terrifying tale and accepted his apology for borrowing their burro. Then they escorted the young boy back to his house. Pedro promised not to go to the village by himself anymore. Then everyone celebrated his safe return by sharing a large bowl of Isabel's heavenly guacamole. After his lucky escape, Pedro was more sensible and stayed out of trouble. When he grew up, Pedro became a fisherman. Not a matador.